nepodařilo jak si ten úspěšný trend z trestu po Itálii k přesunutí vlastně ke zrušení de facto těch velkých psychiatrických ústavů, ale nepodařilo se to do zbytku Evropy třeba.
Good question. Okay, in Italy it happened that in the year 78 there was promulgated a law that obliged all provinces of Italy to close the mental hospitals. This process began in 78, but the last mental hospital was closed about 2000 or 1998, something like this. Okay, how long did Galileo or Copernicus take in order to convince all the world that it is the Earth running around the sun and not vice versa? But neither now it is not yet so that all working staff and psychiatrists especially are convinced of this in whole Italy. In other words, the fact that the mental hospital have been closed does not mean that the mental hospitals that are in the head of the people have been closed everywhere. Generally, the most reluctant people are psychiatrists, because there is behind this prejudice that has not been totally abandoned yet, is the organic paradigm. 1 year ago, my colleague from Bolzano, I was working besides in Merano, said to me, "You are an ideologist because you don't believe in the organic and you are ideological anti-organicist." I said, "I'm not anti-organicist. I am organicist because I believe in our brain, that I am organic in my body and in my brain. Why not? When I'm talking, I am organic. In my brain happens something which is organic. But my being organic has little to deal with what I'm saying. In other words, mental illness has an organic basis. Why not? Please. But it has a meaning. The schizophrenic language, for instance, is a language, but as every language has a sense. You are speaking Czech and I'm speaking Italian, but it's not. There is an organicity probably in you speaking Czech and me speaking Italian. Why not? And for me, it has no sense what you say, but I know it has a sense for you. So if a schizophrenic says he hears the voices of people coming from Mars, it is apparently senseless, but it must have a sense for him. Let's ask ourselves what is the sense of the mental illness without denying the organicity. But you know, most of psychiatrists, not all, fortunately, still believe that the organicity, the organic part of the mental illness is the only explanation. And this is happening in Italy as well. So for instance, in Italy, there are 320 small acute wards in the general hospitals, 320 in all Italy, but only in a few, 20 to 25 to 20, it's difficult to count, of them, they don't restrain people, because the craziness of the mental hospitals has not yet been overtaken in all psychiatrists and psychiatric staff in all Italy. So we are very heavily discussing with those ones, and the discussion is going ahead. So it means that the deinstitutionalization is not finished. The deinstitutionalization is a process that you know when you start, but you don't know when it finished, because it must not finish. When it finishes, it reinstitutionalizes again.
I would like to ask two questions.
Co bylo vlastně to překlopení se z toho digitalizace? A druhá otázka je, jak je to v testu s ochrannými léčbami, protože jsem někdy četl takovou jako zajímavou studii, že v zemích, kde se děje hodně deinstitucionalizace, tak zároveň v některých se hodně zvedá počet jako ochranných léčeb.
First question, what is more important? I have two answers to this question. Everything is important. It is circular, causality. It is difficult to make a hierarchy of what is more important. Everything is very important. But one thing is the most important, which is the overtaking of restraint. If you overtake the restraint in your head, you start being therapeutic. Because when you overtake this mentality of restraining the other, then you start opening your mind, your heart, your ears to the needs, to the language, to the identity of the other that you have in front of you. The second question is the doubt that after closing the mental hospital have increased the forensic situation, the forensic trials and so on. Okay, this is an objection that was very widespread in Europe years ago, because it was a statement: if psychiatric patients are dangerous, if they are not kept in the normal psychiatric hospitals, and then they do crimes, they must go to the forensic psychiatric hospitals. In Germany, for instance, Germany has 80 million of inhabitants. I know there are 16,000 forensic psychiatric patients in forensic hospitals in Germany. In Italy, we have 57 million of inhabitants, and the forensic hospitals are empty, are closed. With the law of the year 2014, has been stated that the forensic psychiatric hospital must be closed. It was a long process. At the beginning, there were maybe 3,000 altogether in the 6 forensic psychiatric hospitals that used to exist in Italy. 3 years ago, in the year 2014, there were maybe 300 patients. And now the forensic psychiatric hospital, as I said before, are empty and closed. But instead of them, the law prescribes that forensic patients have to go in other smaller units with sanitary staff, nurses and doctors inside, instead of military police, let's say. And these units must have not more than 20 beds, 20 patients each. But there might be, I don't know how many, but might be few hundreds patients and a few tens of these units in all Italy. Now we are coping with the hard core of the problem, which is the existence of the non-capacity. In all legislations of the world, I'm sure, only here in Czech Republic, there is foreseen the total incapacity and the partial incapacity of a person. And the judge, when there is a crime performed by a patient, asks to the psychiatrist with an expert opinion if the patient in that moment was capable, partially incapable, or totally incapable. In these recent years, it has been happening that more and more rarely psychiatrists declared to the judge that that patient who performed that crime was totally incapable. In case only partially incapable. 50 years ago, when I was young, I had been taught by my chief medical psychiatrist in Trieste, between me and Basaglia, that it was very simple. If a patient has a neurosis, he was partially incapable. If he has a psychosis, he is totally incapable. But now, very few psychiatrists believe like this anymore, or almost nobody. So, if a patient, if he performed any crime and is only partially incapable, then he must be condemned with a reduction of his pain. And as if he is condemned, he has to stay either in jail or in house arrest. I can remember very well that I had a girl, a young, beautiful young girl that maybe 30 years ago killed another girl. This girl heard the voices of people from Mars who were threatening her father. She went to jail. I visited her in jail, made the expert opinion for the judge, and I asked her why did she kill the other girl, beautiful girl, young girl like her. And she said to me that the voices that they heard of the people from Mars who were threatening her father had nothing to do with that crime that she performed toward the other girl. And that the reason for she killed that girl was that there was a man in between. So nothing to do with mental illness. So I declared her only partially incapable, and she was condemned instead to 30 years of jail to 9 years of jail. And then instead of being sent to the forensic hospital, she was, her jail was transformed into home arrest in one center for mental health of Trieste. And I know that some colleagues heard from her that she said that the jail had been very helpful for her. Another case of another woman who killed her child, and it will be very short because it's very interesting, but it's very interesting. She was declared totally incapable. I visited her in the forensic hospital, and when we were going around in the park of the hospital, she looked perfect, normal, like me and all of you. So at the end of our walk, I asked her, why did you kill your child? And she answered to me, who has done it will pay. Why? Who has done it? It has been you. No, it has not been me. She was hearing the voice of the aesthetic surgeon who had made her breasts larger. And he said through this voice to her that morning, do kill your child. She said that she was reluctant doing this because it was his child, her child. But she was sure that an angle would have taken her hand in order to avoid this crime, like is written in the Bible. What I want to explain you, in one case, the jail is reality and is the premise to elaborate one's crime. In the other case, it was the justice who had declared her not responsible, and she was sure she was not responsible. Okay, now, in 2 weeks in Rome, there will be a big meeting with judges, professors of penal right, psychiatrists, legal doctors, about the hypothesis of abolishing from criminal book the position of the person who is totally incapable. Because there can only be 2 possibilities of being totally incapable. A person who is in coma and the person who has Alzheimer at the final stadium. So it's not true, what you said, the second question of yours, that the number of forensic psychiatrists has been increasing.
Já bych se rád zeptal na 2 věci. Jednou je, nezmínili jsme se o pacientech, zejména velmi pokročilo Alzheimerovou chorobu, jakým způsobem se o ně staráte. A ta druhá otázka je taková trošku na 2 části. Jedna je ta péče o ty pacienty, kterému je určitě ekonomicky je dražší, doprava za pacienty, čas a dále. Kdo nesou ty náklady a kdo nesou ty náklady na té straně u nás, tady sociální sítě, to znamená bydlení a ty věci s tím souvisí.
Alzheimer illness has nothing to do with psychiatry anymore. Alzheimer patient is only a question of care. I remember very well that at the beginning, some wards of the mental hospital was full of elderly patients with Alzheimer and similar illnesses. In order to answer to your first question, elderly people with Alzheimer are cared in different ways. It depends. Of course, there are the elderly houses all over the world and in Italy and also in Trieste. But there is a trend, a tendency to avoid more and more, as much as possible, to take these people into elderly houses. And the trend, it might be the pressure on the population, is to organize more and more care at home with people who care. And it is not more expensive. It is not more expensive. In South Tyrol, Südtirol, where I used to work 14 years, at once the assessor, the minister for care, did once a regulation that the families who took away from elderly houses their elderly relatives were paid by the public province in reverse rate as the richness of the family. And in a few months only, the elderly houses were not emptied, but there were no waiting lists anymore. They disappeared. And the public administration did not lose money because it was costing the same or the less to pay this care at home than in the elderly houses. Okay, then back to the second question, budget question. The answer is very simple. If the transition from inside to outside is well done, there is no increase of costs. I should add that there must be no increase of costs. For two reasons. First, because if there would be an increase of costs, the public administration and the public opinion, because everybody is paying taxes to the state, could say, no, if it's more expensive, could be an excuse not to do the institutionalization. First reason. Second important reason for it's better to have no increase of costs is that if there would be an increase of costs, the staff would not be recycled, but there would be an investment for the staff outside, letting inside the staff who was inside. So you wouldn't close the mental hospital, and there would not happen this Copernican revolution of all staff members who are gradually transposing their working place from inside to outside. The same Copernican revolution which happens in the head of patients and of the public opinion. In the 80s, Margaret Thatcher understood these things. She was a conservative, not a leftist, and ordered two psychiatrists of Great Britain to deinstitutionalize because she knew that there would have decreased the costs. So I don't believe the costs have to decrease, but they have not to increase.
It somehow sounds to me, it sounds very political, what you are saying, and so I keep wondering if the whole process would be possible in a different environment and in different time than in the 70s, after the 68 and after the big boom of the leftist movement and the whole spring, Paris Spring and so on in the West. Because I think the society was ready for it in the 70s.
Okay, what I believe is that, said like that, society is never ready. Society gets transformed by the transformation of the services, of the institution, of the culture. We transform the society by means of the patients that we reinsert in the society and make this transcultural mediation. From fall to fall, you make a transcultural mediation. Like if you have a refugee coming from Afghanistan, from, I don't know, Vietnam now anymore, but I mean, from another culture, there are the transcultural, in Italy and for sure also here, transcultural mediators who mediate between the languages, the inside languages of the people. And once you do this job with psychiatric patients in the society, in the families, in the neighborhood, in the schools, working places, and so on, it is much more interesting. You learn many more things from the patients than keeping them closed inside. I have learned a lot of things from the schizophrenic patients. So, doing this job, you transform the society. The city of Trieste today is different than it was 50 years ago. And I dare to say that maybe not all of them, but many of them are aware of this transformation. And they are also proud of it. Just try and you shall see. In 50 years you tell me, okay?
Mě zaujalo, co jste říkal o tom, že jste se naučil schizofrenní pacienti, takže si můžete konkrétně říct, co jste se naučil.
My view of the world has changed from the fact that I like joking with the names, for instance. I was joking with his name and with Pavel's name yesterday, the day before yesterday. I believe, for instance, a stupid thing, now I'm joking a bit with you. I believe, for instance, that many people, think of it, have their destiny in their surname. A little example, Mario Draghi. Everybody knows in Europe who is Mario Draghi, okay? In my joke, he is the Drake of Europe. Or, I don't know, we have the Prime Minister today in Italy. His name is Gentiloni. And he's a gentle person. Or, more seriously speaking, what I learned from the schizophrenic patients is that, for instance, but I took decades to understand this, the voices. I understood at once that everybody is schizophrenic because each of us is hearing voices when he goes to sleep, for instance. And each of us is seeing movies that don't exist when we go to sleep. This morning, I remember very well, when I was waking up, I was hearing a voice who was telling to me things. It was my voice, but it looked like another voice. Then I woke up, I stopped. Then I understood, third, that the so-called normal people, all of us, okay, who are not schizophrenic, live in a dimension which is the reason, and the schizophrenic people live in a world which is unreason. And so mankind, from I don't know how many thousands of years, have give privilege to the reason than to the unreason, so that when we wake up, the reason which is in us is repressing the voices and the dreams and the unreason. But as Sigmund Freud taught us that the dreams have a sense, also the voices of schizophrenics have a sense for them. And I could tell you 1 hour long things that I learned from the schizophrenic. I just can quote a very, very short example that I knew a Siberian lady who was Siberian shaman, that she told to the public, I let her do a conference in Merano, that when she was an adolescent, she started hearing voices and hearing things that don't exist. And her mother told her, you are right, because you are shaman as I am. Because in Siberia, only ladies are shaman. And she told her, it was after 91 with Yeltsin, okay, now we can return being shamans. Because before, the reasonable Soviet Union was bringing all the shamans to the hospital with the diagnosis, of course. And then understood that also Hippocrates was a shaman, it means a schizophrenic who was hearing voices.
Moc by mě zajímalo, jaká je dnes situace v České republice, jaké kroky už probíhají k deinstitucionalizaci a kdo s ní musí začít, jestli je třeba teda osvícení ředitelů psychiatrických léčeben, nebo se působit na politiky, aby zaváděli ty zákony, nebo naopak začít jakoby ambulantními centry, kde začít.
Do you ever go into the woods to plug mushrooms? You take mushrooms that you find. You don't say, this mushroom should be here, and I should take it if it would grow up. So, I mean, everything is useful and important. Pressure on the politician, pressure of the director, doing personally, going into the homes and the house and so on and so forth, doing conferences, doing legislation is very important, of course. But all these things alone are not sufficient. What I believe at the end is that we are in the history. History is changing. I see all of you are very, very interested. You belong to the history. You belong to the instrument that will start changing the situation in this mental hospital in Prague and gradually in all Czech Republic and in Europe and so on and so forth. So do the best you can and you will have satisfaction and pleasure of having done this huge transformation in your country.
Na tu malinko možná zareaguju teda za nás. Myslím, že čas od času jsme prostě nespokojeni, že to všechno jde pomalu.
I think that from time to time we are dissatisfied that the things are happening so slowly. The things are happening, but let's do them now, because now is the time. Because as Lorenzo said, time is right every time, anytime. But I think that the time is major now, and if it doesn't happen now, I guess that we should make a different meeting about what is exactly happening and talk about it, and we should have a meeting with a director as well, and, because the transformation...
Yes, I said, being in Czech Republic, of course, that Basaglia is a psychiatrist, remained a psychiatrist, I am a psychiatrist, only was an heretical, like Jan Hus. So you are Czech people, and Jan Hus is an important heretical for you, I guess. So take this example maybe in order to find the courage in yourself to discuss, put in discussion psychiatry in practice without abandoning psychiatry from inside. Jan Hus was not an atheist. He believed in God, in Christ, and so on and so forth, like Luther and so on, and like Bergoglio today. The Pope, in my opinion, today is an heretic as well. But he is like Basaglia. He's transforming the church from inside. Another item that it is important to be aware in this moment in this historical moment is, at least in Italy, it's happening, but not only in Italy, in Holland, in the United States, in Slovenia, and for sure also here, that is coming out the scandal of pedophilic priests. I have been involved in 2 trials, now there is a 3rd one, where a grown-up girl or grown-up boy say, that priest had abused of me when I was a kid, okay? But they had forgotten everything for 10, 15 years. And maybe through a psychotherapy, suddenly and gradually they recall what happened from the side of that priest. And the court was asking me to make a report, is that boy, that girl, crazy because they have suffered a lot and they are not believable, or is it a consequence of this misuse, the fact that they did forget and so on and they were badly in psychiatric sense and so on? And I answered, no, this what they say is realistic happened, and their mental illness was the consequence of the misuse of the priest. So I'm very proud of being allied of the Pope in this moment, in this historical moment. And one thing which is happening in these years that we are maybe not enough aware of is that gradually parents are believing to kids. Because when the kids are abused by priests or by other adults, it's difficult to believe them. But I also said to the court, 40 years ago, 50 years ago was the time of believing to the patients, schizophrenic patients. Today is the moment to believe to the kids when they say, I have been abused by an adult. So let's take this incredible moment in the history. it's a right moment to do.
Tak nezbývá říct, než pojďme na to. Já bych tímto poděkoval Lorenzovi, abych tak řekl hluboký a, jak to říct, inspirativní podněty. No a myslím, že můžeme Lorenzovi zatleskat. A sami sobě taky.
Na zdraví.